welcome to Contra Mundum. My name is Andrew Isker, and I'm here with my co-host CJ Engel. Hello, CJ.
I'm ready to get started.
The first big thing from this week that was 2023, first week of February, the balloon. We had a balloon that flew over the country and scared everyone, and finally was shot down after it had crossed the entire country. So CJ, what's going on with the balloon? Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, we were going to talk about the fakeness of the balloon, but it's funny because just this morning, I don't know if you saw it, but I guess there was some threat over Alaska, 40,000 miles away. I don't even know if that's accurate. I think I saw the number 40,000 somewhere.
40,000 feet. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. 40,000 miles, 40,000 feet. Uh, we're not claiming to be accurate news, but we will analyze it. So, but they shot it down immediately, right? And everyone heard about it after the fact. So that was kind of my point when we were discussing this last time, is if there ever is a threat, they can take it out within 30 seconds. So the fact that there was this big ordeal made out of nothing, a floating balloon, that these things have been around since the 50s.
Yeah.
And the surveillance technology that's integrated into our daily lives, not only can China get a much deeper inspection of what's going on through our phones and through our computers and everything, but we also have like the CIA, the NSA, and all of the myriad federal government agencies, not to mention the Five Eyes program in Israel and all that stuff. So the idea that this balloon was some sort of unique surveillance threat is kind of goofy.
Yeah.
And it's something that's so goofy, only the national security establishment can make a big deal out of it. So I think the whole thing was overblown, and it was basically meant to drum up tensions with China, which seems to be where the regime is going, in terms of their relationship with the East. So I think the whole thing was a bunch of nothing. I don't agree with the mainstream, like conservative incorporated take that this is a sign of Biden administration's weakness. I think all that is nothing. If there really was a threat, they could have shut it down before it even happened. I mean, that's the power of the U.S. security state.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think some of it too, you see this happen a lot with the the conservative analysis of things going on, that the typical like low hanging fruit conservative take is, yeah, Biden is incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing. He has all these millennials that care more about pronouns than governing well and so forth. They're all incompetent idiots, and there's certainly some truth to that. Of course, this is why they say it. But we saw the same thing happen with Afghanistan. Initially, when Afghanistan happened, I thought, wow, they're a bunch of idiots. What are they doing? They're totally messing this up. They're leaving all this equipment over in Afghanistan. They're doing all this. They're getting out of there. They don't need to. Why are they abandoning it so easily? Even though, I mean, obviously they should have gotten out of Afghanistan 20 years ago. But why now? And why is it such a disaster and such a mess? Well, it's clear that they were doing this to devote all of their resources to Ukraine. Like, they knew this was coming, and they prepared for it. It wasn't stupid. So some of this is the same type of thing. It looks like incompetence, that they're just letting this happen, but they're trying to drum up support, because you look at Ukraine, and we'll discuss Ukraine in a minute, things going on there. But you look at Ukraine, and immediately what happened as soon as the war began was all of the people who understood what happened with everything in 2020, and were skeptical of everything that the TV told them during 2020 with the elections and the riots and the disease. Immediately they just buy everything that the TV says, right? They're like, oh, Putin is bad, he's evil, and whatever the TV tells me about this conflict, I am going to believe. And so that's what happened there. Like, war and foreign policy completely change, like, causes everyone to turn into a mindless drone. And so the same thing has happened. They're running the same play basically with China, because Russia, China, Brazil to some extent, although Brazil has kind of been pacified in some extent because they got rid of Bolsonaro through a quasi color revolution there as well. And so you have China, Russia, maybe India. It's harder to say, right? Maybe Hungary too. They're kind of on the edge of the EU. but you have these countries that are unaligned with the globalist American empire, and they are threats. And so one of the things, I mean, one of the questions that people typically I've had is we know about all the dealings of our politicians with these countries, with both Russia and China. I mean, Hillary Clinton sold a bunch of uranium, and she got a bunch of money. The Clinton Foundation got a bunch of money from the Russians. Biden, of course, got a bunch of money from Ukraine. He's also got money from China and Russia. And so all of these politicians, right? They get money from these foreign powers, but right at the same time they're saber rattling against Russia, obviously, and now China as well. So unpack that for me. Why does it happen that way? What does that mean?
I think, yeah. I think one of the things that needs to be paid attention to is when there is a pretty pleasant relationship between the East and the West, there's money to be made. And, these politicians they're world-class experts at basically whoring themselves out for money. Like that's what they do. They'll take money from anyone and they'll do anything for it. And so when times are fine, that's how you can have foreign interference and foreign involvement in our political process. And that's kind of the norm is to these politicians will make deals. They'll make deals with corporations and they'll make deals with, nation states in order to do what they do. I mean, they're so easy to pay off. They have zero higher principle except for to their own their own depraved desires. But at the end of the day, politics does matter, and we don't live in a one world government right now. And so when there are geopolitical conflicts, the American political class, they recognize that they have to protect the regime, and the regime is in Washington, D.C. And if Putin is going to act in a way that prevents the regime from expanding its borders and expanding its influence out throughout the world, and China joins them for geostrategic reasons, the United States, they're going to quickly come back and make sure at the end of the day that the regime stays strong, because that is their god. They don't really care about what's going on over there, except in as much as it impacts their own ability to dominate Eastern Europe and extend NATO influence. So I think that's what's really going on, is when things are okay, they'll make a buck. When things are beginning to get heated, in Washington cannot imagine a world where they don't have total control.
Yeah.
And if something seems to threaten that, they will agitate for war. And that's what's going on in Ukraine. Ukraine's just a proxy for United States power.
Yeah, they will. They'll actually, and some people might think like, oh, World War III is going to happen, and it's not as though that they are going to just go rush headlong into World War III. It's that they're going to exercise power to get the results that they want. So if China is operating in such a way that they are a threat to American hegemony, right, then there's going to be pressure put on them from all sorts of different ways. I mean, you've seen this for really like the last 30 years or longer. I mean, Tiananmen Square, for example, was an American color revolution attempt. I mean, they do this stuff.
Everything is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like anything,
popular uprisings are American backed.
Popular uprisings. Yeah.
It's all fake.
Yeah.
All fake.
Yeah. None of them are real. Like they're all paid. I mean, like the primary example, of course, is 2014 in Ukraine, where you have like all of this brand new, like Ukraine's one of the poorest countries, if not the poorest country in Europe. But in 2014, like you had all this like brand new computers and equipment and all this kind of stuff that like when you see the camps of the protesters and things like that, all this food, every supply they could possibly need, clothing, all of it. Where did it come from? Who paid for it? Right? Obviously, all of this is put on. All of it is fake. I mean,
well, yeah, the State Department was there.
Yeah,
they were saying exactly what they were trying to do.
Yeah,
So yeah.
Victoria Nuland like admitted to all of it, right? So like everybody knows this, and of course, like this conflict and things like this, they're put on. So we should be a little bit more skeptical when we see the big scary Chinese balloon. It isn't like, oh, like the Chinese have our best interests of the American people in mind. Of course they don't. We're a geopolitical adversary of theirs. But at the same time, just the same thing with like Russia. Like anytime people want to, and we'll get to this later, but anytime you you are critical of what the American regime is doing, like people will be like, "Oh, you love Putin, you love Russia," and it's like, well, no, actually, I love America, but I understand that the people that rule my country are very, very evil, and I don't always want them to succeed in their evil schemes. Moving on, speaking of evil schemes and the evil people that run our country, the nominal head of the evil people who run our country, Joe Biden, gave the State of the Union address. And so the State of the Union address, of course, here at Contra Mundum, we have nothing but the most utter respect for American norms and traditions of our politicians. I mean, it's a decorum. We care a lot about decorum here. And so we will only speak in hushed tones about how important the State of the Union address is. Isn't that right,
Yes.
Jay?
Yeah, it's so important that I only made it 30 seconds into the demonstration, because I had to brush my teeth. But by the way, there's a pride flag. You made this graphic for the record. You made it with the pride flag above my head.
Yeah, I got
like
the cool
one.
Like
this devil's horns.
That's right.
I don't. Yeah, as a setup, complete setup. I didn't make it.
Got him. I got
him. Yeah, you got me. And you're like, you need to use this graphic, and I'm going to use the base. I'm going to use the base graphic.
I get King Alfred. You get. No, the cross is right above you. That's the important thing. That's what we wanted.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. It's.
They all stand like right
here. Scoot over a little bit so we can see how cool of a picture it is.
Yeah. That's better.
There we go. State of the Union happens, and Joe Biden somehow makes it through the speech. They had enough pills for him to take to be able to mostly get through the speech without slurring every single word. But I mean, ultimately, what is the State of the Union? It's. I mean, originally, like if you go back to American history, because the Constitution requires the executive to inform the legislature about the state of the union. That's really all it is. And so, originally, what they would do, they'd write a letter to Congress, and that was it. Only very recently, only really with the advent of mass media, did it become a huge production, a big speech that the president would give. And originally, of course, people talk about like, oh, it's very important that they're respectful and everything else. Like this last one, I mean, I remember like 10 years ago when a single lone congressman yelled out, "You lie!" To Obama. Of course, he lied. I mean, all they do is lie. But and people lost their minds over that, like this breach of decorum. Oh my goodness. Well, thankfully, we had this godsend of a president named Donald Trump, who made a mockery of the whole all of this fakeness, right? All of this whole facade of respectability in Washington D.C. I mean, these are just white. I mean, if you want to think of like an example of whited sepulchers, right, that Jesus talked about, I mean, that's them. That's these people, and he just exposed them for what they were, right? And so all the decorum is gone. It's out the window. And of course, Biden is a mirror image of this, right? He turned this speech, which is supposed to be this speech where I guess you laud the things that you've done over the past year, the successes of, and some of your legislative items that you want to, accomplish. But he turned it into, right, this very partisan thing. And of course, people are upset about this, and they're very upset about the Republicans, yelling and carrying on. I mean, it really kind of looked like a scene from a European Parliament, right, where they're just like yelling at each other across the aisle. I mean,
yeah,
that's
good.
Really, and exactly, great. That's what it should be. I want them to fight a little bit at least. At least make it look good, right? But ultimately, like it should. I mean, I want the fakeness of this stuff to be exposed.
Yeah.
So
the idea of loggerheads, fighting and having the tension, with the Republicans outraged. Of course, they were outraged, protecting their own political profiles and professions and all that. But I really do. I think there needs to be more strife and tension and dissent and mutinies and congressmen going rogue. I mean, we need some of that shakeup. The idea that we're all supposed to, especially Congress, in the Senate, especially if everyone's getting along, then you know that you're being screwed over,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah,
So
that's what's it
you
is, the
need.
Murray Rothbard quote, I think, is that like if anything bipartisan, it means that like the people are getting screwed. Like
Yeah, basically.
I think that's Rothbard quote. Like if it's true, anything bipartisan is always going to be monstrous.
Yeah. So we
Always
actually
gonna be
need
bad.
we actually need more partisanship, but it needs to be a part of partisanship that's grounded in the interests of the American people. And so like, I mean, there's very few people like that, and I don't want to. I mean, people like Matt Gaetz, and I don't want to, place too much. I know we're going to talk about people like Ron DeSantis and stuff, so we should always be wary about putting our faith in people. But the people like Matt Gaetz, who are just stubbornly saying no when all the pressure is put on them to get along, that's the type of partisanship we need. We need someone to just stubbornly make kind of a chaos presence
Yeah.
in Congress. And I think that's what's good for the country. Not this get along, be quiet, listen to the revered speaker because he's the head of state. That's ridiculous and that's absurd, and that's not politics. That's actually the absence of politics. And when you don't have politics, you have tyranny. Politics is good because it absorbs that tension and puts it out into a transparent avenue for everybody to see the fight. The fight is good. The fight means that there's hope. So that's what I want to see more of. I want to see something chaotic. I want to see like if you read about like the Roman Senate, I mean, there were stabbings, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
yes. So like, let's return. That's
even early American history. Like like a guy got beat in the head with a cane one time in the United States Senate.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
bring it back, return exactly, bring it back.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that maybe was going to happen during the speaker fight with Matt Gaetz. Like it got a little bit tested. Like one guy got grabbed, but more of we should see more of this. Like people, I mean, the people like I don't know, David French or whoever. I mean, he like people like that, right? That were like, oh, our norms and decorum and all of the things that that matter so much. Our decency is being violated. It's like, yes, I want that. These are evil people doing evil things. I want people that are going to fight them and not let them lie and not pretend everything is okay. I want war. I want the Andrew Breitbart war. Like that's what I want. That's
yeah, exactly. I think what decorum means, and what are like what they mean by traditions, is not traditions. What they mean is the Iraq War. What they mean is the Department of Education. What they mean is the administrative state entering every aspect of our lives and radicalizing it under the radar. And that what they mean by decorum is submission. So we don't want decorum. I think we want politics. I think we want very clearly drawn lines between the friend and the enemy. I think that's kind of where we need to go. So we can go forward to the Trump DeSantis or whatever you want to talk next.
Speaking of very clear lines between friend and enemy and actual politics being done, some of the things that have happened very recently has been things happening in Florida, in the state of Florida, and a few other states, where political power is being realized and wielded by a head of government in the state of Florida against our enemies. It's a wonderful thing. It's great. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that happened this week that I mean your real conservative types are up in arms over is that Governor DeSantis took away the liquor licenses of these bars and restaurants establishments that were having drag queen performances with little kids, people grinding on little toddlers and wearing, dresses and things of that nature. He shut them down. He took away their liquor licenses. Of course, people are like, oh, you can't do that. That has nothing to do with whether they violated the rules of serving alcohol, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, who cares? Who cares what the rules are? He has power and you get to use it when you're governor. And so these people, I mean, it's the same thing. The other thing that he's done is he took Christopher Rufo, and put him on the board of one of these universities in Florida and set him there to fight the DEI and all of the wokeness and everything that's taken over the universities. And you have people like Jordan B. Peterson from Canada, who want to let us know. And imagine if the situation was reversed, right? Could you imagine if leftists get this power over
Yeah.
education? I mean,
Yeah.
what happened to
I
this guy?
mean,
What
yeah.
happened
So,
to him? Like,
yeah. So, I mean, first of all, I mean, the definition of educational development over 120 years has been leftists in the hands of power. I mean, if you look at what happened in the progressive era, this is where it all started. Was it like Princeton University? Right? This is what happened to Machen and to the Westminster Theological Seminary. It was all about the leftists have always had the universities for 120 years. And the second we began to fight back in any small minuscule detail, we have Jordan Peterson to lecture us and think about what might happen if the left comes into power. It's absurd. But the other thing that it does, and I think it's a denial of the essence and the reality of the political, the concept of the political.
yeah.
I think the idea that we can somehow picture this neutral world where everyone gets along and the right doesn't have its way and the left doesn't have this way. We just have this middle ground where we can all be happy. I think that's nonsense. I think politics is forever. And yeah, you should fear what happens if the left gets that power. And that's why we need more right wingers and more Christians in power wielding it.
Yeah.
Because we should be concerned about what happens if the left gets that power. Because we're seeing what happens when they get that power, and we need to stop them from getting that power. And the only way to stop them from getting that power is not the libertarian solution of just closing it down, because that's actually not a solution because it's impossible. But the libertarian solution is to get in, wield the power, crush the enemy, and if then if you can back off, that's great. But if not, we're in a state of culture war, and you have to wield power. There's no middle ground. There's no deep politicization. It's either your friends have power or your enemies have power. There's no other option. There's the myth of an option.
Yeah.
But there's no political reality of a third way.
The myth of the option is just surrender. That's all it is. Like your option is fight or surrender. And so far, conservatives have always surrendered. That's all we do. We surrender, and it's with this quasi libertarian myth that we could just avoid political power. A lot of Christians buy into this, where it's like political power is icky and bad, and you shouldn't want to wield it. And it's like, I look over my shoulder here is this example of King Alfred, where their country is overrun by pagan Vikings that are raping and pillaging and murdering and stealing. And what did he have to? He had to wield political power against enemies that were doing evil, right? There is no option of if we just withdraw from politics, if we just do some Benedict option stuff and hide in the monastery, we'll be okay. No, that's not a solution. That's not possible.
This is why
you have to fight.
This is why I think Stephen Wolf's book and an entire framework is so important. I think he does a really good job at recognizing the fact that when we live in temporal situations, that we live in the second kingdom, that we have earthly concerns, that we are supposed to and obligated as human beings, as creatures, to care for our family, our kin, our tribe, those that God placed around our nation. I think those are temporal concerns, and they don't necessarily have to do with the eternal heavenly kingdom. It is okay to fight for temporal concerns. It is okay to fight back against, in a political way, against political threats. I think that project, is a great third option between theonomy and just sort of the giving up, R2K solution. I think that his model, his framework, I think is right where the Christian conversation needs to be, recognizing the two kingdoms, fighting for things that are temporal, because we're created beings and God created us for community. He created us for society, and we need to honor him in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the bigger issues, and then we'll continue this conversation on into the future, into future episodes. But you're exactly right that we want to we want to have both these options, where it's like either we have this perfectly one kingdom theonomic idea where it's like we're just going to copy and paste the Mosaic Law into the U.S. Constitution on the one hand, and then that's a very small group that holds to that view. Then you have, on the other hand, Christians that just are completely checked out entirely. They have no desire. They think it's holy to not care about. I mean, you imagine being an Anglo-Saxon in the 900s, as Vikings are ransacking everything and just saying, well, I'm very holy and I don't really care. This world's not our home. It doesn't matter. That's the perspective of a lot of Christians. Of course, that's buttressed by the fact we've had 50 or 60 or 70 years of unimaginable economic success that we've enjoyed collectively as a people, where it's really easy to say that when life is pretty good. But as we are in very steep decline, both economically, politically, socially, culturally, it's a lot harder than it was to say that than it was 10 years ago even. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of Christians are being forced to have to come to these realizations and realize it's not going to stop. Like, checking out is not going to work. I can go hang out down in my rapture bunker and wait for the rapture to happen, but so far it hasn't. And every time they say it's gonna, it hasn't. So like, don't put your hope in that and just the end of the world happening, this Deus ex machina taking place. Like, you need to fight. You need to stand up and fight. And you need to find other people that want to fight on your side. And whether it's gaining the governorship of an important state like Florida, or
California.
Or that's right, or California. Yeah.
You're like, well,
or Minnesota.
Lost cause. Some things have to be lost causes.
That's right. Yeah. There might be more profitable paths to pursue.
Okay, yeah.
But right, instead of doing those things, we need to pursue political power where we can. Like, every single person has influence wherever they are, whether, like you said, in this temporal world that you're in. Like, you have family, right? You have a neighborhood that you are a part of. You have relationships that you're a part of, where you can wield influence. And Christians have just checked out. We've said, no, we don't want to do this. And some of it too is like we refuse to understand what politics is, right? At the most root, basic level, politics is using power to benefit your people, your friends, at the expense of your enemies, right? To harm your enemies and to help your friends, right? To defend your people against the people that mean to do them harm. And if you don't get that, like, you don't get what any of it is. So at the end of the day, like, Ron DeSantis is doing a great job in the state of Florida, and I hope he stays there for the next 40 years, because, right, even if he is everything that the most rosy-eyed glasses wearer of DeSantis stand thinks he is, which I'm skeptical. Even if he is as great as his mom and his wife and all of his best friends think he is, if he got to Washington, D.C., instead of having control of all the bureaucracies, all of the political power, all the levers of power in the state of Florida, now he has all of those things, if he's a good guy, arrayed against him. Yeah. And you're giving up Florida to an uncertain future as well. Like, it's a very important state. Like, one of the things he also just did is the legislature there is expanding the National Guard and expanding their authority over the National Guard, which, I mean, people want to think like, oh, it's national divorce. Oh, he's getting ready for Civil War II. Here we go. Ron DeSantis is going to don a gray jacket and a white horse, and he's going to ride out to face the Union. Like, no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. But the important, like, everybody saw what happened in 2020, and how red states, red governments, things like this, were totally unprepared, totally flat-footed for what happened, for the color revolution of 2020. And having, a much more powerful National Guard, much more powerful civil defense organization in the state of Florida will allow them to just put that down with an iron fist immediately and never allow that to happen in their state. And so things like that, that's the kind of stuff that has to happen. There's other states that this is happening to: Oklahoma, Idaho, Montana. They're doing good things on the woke stuff, on the LGBT stuff, like fighting these things. That's all fantastic. But I, like, as far as national politics goes, we've done nothing but praise Ron DeSantis and say how great he is and what a wonderful governor he is. But why are you against him running for president in 2024? Or maybe you're not. Maybe I'm my opinion on you.
I don't know if I'm against, well, I don't know if I'm against it, but I don't buy it. I don't buy that he is like I don't buy that he's gonna fulfill the role that everyone thinks he's gonna fulfill, not only because of the character of the administrative state, but also because of his own background and his own connections and his own deeply funded allies.
Yeah.
I think that at the end of the day, he took advantage in a good way of a specific political context within the Florida political apparatus and did a good job with what he had. But I don't think that he's going to be some like paleoconservative right wing dissenter. And I don't think he's going to have the power or the will to push against neoconservatism. I think at the end of the day, the GOP and the entire thrust of its momentum is going to be neoconservative. I think he's going to push a neoconservative foreign policy. I think he's going to push for a more robust relations with Israel, which I'm not fond of, in any sense. I think that's disastrous, not only for American freedom, but also for the health and stability of the Middle East and ultimately the world. I think that he'd be very, too much on that team. I also think that he doesn't have. I think he has more of a this idea that he can tinker around the edges of the administrative state and make things a little bit better without seeing the administrative state as the enemy.
Yeah.
Right. So his entire framework for power works well within the Floridian context, but it doesn't work well at the national level. And I think at the end of the day, he's going to be sort of a Bushite, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, you see at the State of the Union, Mitch McConnell has his blue and gold tie, and like he's very much supporting Ukraine. Like he's going to be in that mold. Like he doesn't, like he's not a billionaire. Like, I mean, here's the thing, like everyone thinks, oh, you love Trump, you think Trump can do no wrong. It's like, no, if you want to like discuss all of the problems with Donald Trump, all the things that are wrong, every mistake he's done, everything like that, like get in line because I've got a lot. But at the end of the day, right, because of his billions, he had quite a bit more independence to plot a much more independent course against the neoconservatives within the Republican Party. He was able to dissent from them. He was able to do a lot of things that he wanted to do, that he promised he would do in the 2016 election. And so, I mean, one of the best presidents, foreign policy wise, in 100 years, maybe longer. And so, like, and that's at the federal level, like the most important thing to the regime is foreign policy, is exerting American power overseas. Like that is issue number one to them. That's the basis of all of their power, is that. So if we want to talk about like the trans stuff and the woke stuff and
right,
global homoizing the entire world, right, it starts with that base of power. They want that.
And that's the problem too, is like the entire thrust of the DeSantis phenomenon has basically been a post 2016. So like, I mean, his entire vision can be interpreted as a bring us back to 2015.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really appeal to me, as someone who, sees the long course of the 20th century and everything that's happened. I mean, you don't have to have this mentality of I want everything returned back to 1900 or bust. I don't think you have to have that mentality. But at the same time, if you don't understand that everything has been denigrated, that everything has gone downhill for a very long time, if you don't see the steps along the way, then I don't think you're going to have a proper framework for going forward. So like this idea that like, we were heroes in 2000 in the World War II and the Cold War and the Reagan administration, and then the Bush, he fought the terrorists and kept us safe and was making the world safe for democracy and fighting for women's rights in Afghanistan and all this stuff. And then suddenly Obama came along and brought us a Marxist. Like it's tiresome, and I think DeSantis could kind of tend in that direction.
Yeah, I think that is probably the direction he would go. Like the most important thing, and I say this all the time, and I'm going to keep saying this all the time, for national politics is to delegitimize the regime, right? That is the most important issue. Like, is this candidate going to make the regime look ridiculous, make them look stupid? Is he going to show that the emperor has no clothes? Ron DeSantis is not going to do that.
Right.
At the very best, like the absolute very best, it would be like if Mitt Romney won the 2012 election, right? That's what it's going to be, right? I mean, really, it is. I mean, people don't want to hear that because they see the great stuff that he's done in Florida, and they think that translates, but it's not. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, the analogy I would use would be like in college football, like a quarterback who's just absolutely awesome in college football. Tim Tebow, for example, from Florida. Awesome college quarterback, amazing national championships, all that Heisman trophies, all that kind of stuff, gets to the NFL and is worthless. Like he is not, I mean, this is, some people think he was great. Was not a good quarterback in the NFL because you have to be like so much better. It's a totally different ball game, right? Completely different. I mean, it's the same analogy, right? I mean, it fits. DeSantis is great at where he's at. Like, let him play football and run the football down in Florida, score touchdowns for the next 40 years. Because if he tries to go to the next level, he is going to be a bust. That's what's going to. I'm telling you, everybody needs to know this. Like, get through their head. That's what's going to happen.
It's like, I mean, it's the same thing as it always is, and conservatives are always disappointed. I mean, Lucy's pulling the football right out from under Charlie Brown once again. It's like the same thing. You put hope in these guys, but look, I mean, I think you do. I think the idea of disenfranchising or disenchanting rather people's perception of the glories of Washington is far more important than tinkering with the most recent policies of the administrative state. I mean, people need to understand that the entire thing is goofy and ludicrous, and they need to be called out for being clowns. They're not to be revered. They're not special people. They're just a bunch of dumb. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, just look at like tweets making fun. Like this is why like people talk about like January 6th and like, oh, it was so terrible, blah blah blah. It's like, no, like it served a very important function. It made a lot of people in Washington look absurd and ridiculous. Like the people crying, like Adam Kinzinger crying about it. Oh my goodness, yeah. Like that's the function. Like these people are cowards. They're weak. Like the guy who was wearing the like gas mask fart huffing suit. Those photographs. I mean, they're classic. That's the kind of stuff that has to happen. Is like these people need to look ridiculous. And quite honestly, like the 2020 election and the 2022 election. Like a lot of people blackpilled after this. They got really depressed and thought, oh, it's all over. It's woe is us. What are we going to do? And it's like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, did you think like this wave of Trumpist Republicans was going to come in and dismantle the regime and bring back the glory days of the United States? Like, that's not what's going to fix things.
Yeah, I hope that process awakened people to political realities.
Yes, yeah. It's a white pill.
You're not going to change things through the ballot box.
No.
It's good for people to realize. It's good for people to see, quite frankly, that Biden won. And we've talked about this many times, and people say, no, actually Trump won if you count legitimate votes. But counting legitimate votes has no bearing on who's wielding power, as you can see from Carrie Lake losing, and as you can see from Donald Trump losing, because winning is about capturing the reins of power. That's what winning is, right? So who won those elections? They did, because they were willing to do what it takes. They were willing to act politically to overcome the restraints of the electoral process to get into power. And the conservatives and Republicans were not willing to do that, and so they lost.
Yeah. And we don't have this like reserve of losers that the Democrats have, losers and criminals and ne'er-do-wells to be able to call upon to go do fraudulent activities. Like, we can't do that, and we're never going to have that. And so, but like, that's, I think the white pill is tens of millions of people realizing like this is not going to work. I mean, they're highly politicized people. They're people that care deeply about politics, but they realize like electoral politics for the most part is a dead end. It's not going to get anywhere. And that leads me to one of our next topics. The FBI, the Richmond FBI office, a memo got leaked that showed they were trying to infiltrate traditionalist Roman Catholic circles and send secular, white nationalist types into these trad Cath circles. And of course, the FBI immediately said, "Oh, this didn't meet our standards. We're pulling back this memo. We're nothing to see here. This isn't happening." But very clearly, like, the FBI is trying to infiltrate religious groups, and they conservative, right wing religious groups. Why is that? Why do they care? I mean, because traditionalist Roman Catholics, you have people that go to Latin Mass. They're a tiny percentage of Roman Catholics who are at a small percentage of the overall population of the United States. So why do they care so much about those people?
Because they have to make them look ridiculous. They have to make people who operate outside of the mentality of the postmodernist administrative managerial state. They have to make anybody who dissents look like freaks, like losers, like radicals, like revolutionary anarchists. I mean, they have to make them look like we shouldn't even be talking about their legitimacy within society. So that's why they have to send people in there. Like when you have, I mean, like what's that one group that Gavin McMinnis started? The
Proud Boys.
The Proud Boys, right? So originally the Proud Boys was pretty much just it wasn't even that right wing, right? But it was
they're like pro-gay, and they were,
well, now they are. Yeah. But when they first started, they were basically like right of center. But they went in, they infiltrated it. They have a bunch of plants in there because they want to make anyone who stands up for their rights as men, for the function of men, for masculinity. They want to make anyone who talks about those things look like very scary parts of society that basically should be pushed to the outside. I mean, so that's what they do with all of these groups that come together based on questioning some aspect of regime ideology. They have to basically make them look like clowns and scary people, and they have to make these wine ants super scared of them, and all of these white liberal college graduates scared of them, so that they can continue on pushing their regime ideology on the rest of the country. So it also makes people like us scared, not like us, but people who would otherwise be in our shoes scared to question things. I actually have a really good friend. I'm not going to say his name, but he works for one of the most profitable countries in the world. Fortune, one of the top 5 wealthiest countries. I'm not going to say what company it is, but he is scared livid to say the wrong thing, to make it appear like he's going to vote for the wrong person, to even have conversations to me on his various devices about political matters. He won't talk about it. He won't think about it because he doesn't want to be associated with those types of groups. And it's really sad to see someone so neutered. And I do call him a little bit of a coward. He does need to, put some pants on and be a man a little bit. But it's true. That's what's happening, is they're taking these people who have very historically normal conservative positions, and they're making them scared livid to even operate, so they don't get fired and their children destroyed.
Well, and not only that, not even like your regular folks, not even the like regular people thinking like, oh, I can't join that group. Oh, Latin Mass. Oh my goodness, I can't. I'm just gonna keep going to my regular Catholic church. Like people, they're obviously they're trying to do that, try to scare people off of that. I mean, you see this also with the Roman Catholic pro-life protester. They arrested, charged. They had a SWAT team show up at his house, even though he said he was going to turn himself in. At dawn, they show up with all his kids around with guns drawn, and it's like, why are they doing this? Like it, and the charges, like I think almost got immediately, got thrown out.
Because the drama was
that's the point.
Right. That was exactly the point.
Yeah. The entire point of it is so that for a few weeks, anybody that shows up to an abortion clinic and holds up a sign or prays or has the rosary beads or whatever, like anybody that does that stuff is going to get a visit from the FBI and is going to have their life ruined. Like that's what they want, you to be afraid. They want it. So on one hand, like again, like stuff like this, stuff like January 6th, stuff like all of it seems like a huge black pill. Or it seems like, or in the election, all of it seems like, oh, this is incredibly depressing. But it should not be, because they understand, our enemies more than we do, understand how important the Christian faith is in resisting them. Right? They understand like actual genuine Christian, not like the fake stuff, right? Not the stuff where people just they show up to their church and are told Jesus loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life, and you don't have to actually believe anything the Bible says to do. But make sure you put some money in the offering. Like the typical big box church Christian people, right? They don't care about them. They're not a threat. Like the Big Eva Gospel Coalition type people who just parrot whatever the regime says, right? Those people are not a threat at all. But people who like actually believe what the Bible says, right? People who see what God's word says and do it and live that way, that's a huge threat to them because it's totally counter to how they live. I mean, it's the title of our show, right? It's the image there that you're sitting in front of is right this huge crucifix being held up to these demons all around, saying no more, right? Like Gandalf, you shall not pass, right? That's what it is. And even though there's not very many, like there are not tons of people in both Catholic churches or churches like mine. Are small, that are conservative, reformed, evangelical churches. Very small, not a lot of people, but it's growing. And these movements are like, that's the thing. The movements are growing very quickly because, right, we're in steep decline. We're in steep economic decline. People are angry, right? People see that we don't have, like, the GOP doesn't represent us. Right, Kevin McCarthy, what's he going to do for me and my family? Like, he's not going to do. What's he going to do? The first thing he wants to do is cut Social Security. Like, that's his big priority. You know, I mean, one of the things that they booed Biden about was actually like kind of mostly true. Like, he's not going to get rid of it completely, but they want to get rid of like all these big programs and balance the budget and do Paul Ryan type stuff when that's like the least popular thing ever. Like, it doesn't work with the voters at all. Like, this is something Trump understood. They're not going to like do anything about stuff regular people care about, like secure the border. They're not going to do that, right? They're not going to keep us. They're not going to get rid of drugs and fentanyl and things. They don't care about those things. So we have no representation whatsoever, right? They're not going to bring down the price of eggs and meat, right? That's not going to happen. They're going to keep printing money and sticking it all over.
They're also anti-egg.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
we can talk about that later. But
that's another. That's maybe another episode. But like they're doing. There's no representation whatsoever, and we've talked before. About how democracy works, like in real terms, not in the Schoolhouse Rock sense, but in like real terms. How does democracy work? Where you have this dialectic, basically, where you have the left, right, the far left, and you have the far right, and then you have this center, this kind of center right that it exists to maintain the status quo. Because if you get rid of that, then you get this far right. Like this, we talked about the situation in 20th century Germany, in Weimar Germany, and Carl Schmitt, we've talked about him before. That his whole goal was to try to get the Weimar government to have teeth, to be more powerful, and to forestall, like to represent the people and do the stuff that people wanted to do to protect them from communists. And they wouldn't do that. So the people chose, very far right people to do monstrous stuff. Like, that's kind of the situation that we're going to end up in the next 10, 20, 30 years. As our situation declines. And it's almost like with this FBI stuff, like what they're doing with the regime, it's like they almost want that. It feels like why are they bringing Wignats into traditionalist Roman Catholic circles? Like, why are they trying to stir this stuff up? Like, are they trying to bring it to have more J6 type stuff, more Gretchen Whitmer type stuff? I think the answer is yes. They want people to do stupid things so they can have this like they want to raise up. They want to raise up like this radical right wing. That to do violent stuff that they can immediately shut down and destroy, so as to close off any actual opposition that does effective, decent, sensible things, right? That isn't radical in that sense.
I think you're right. I think they want to get it out of the way. They want to create an artificial version of it that it's controlled. It's like a controlled burn. Like out here in Northern California, we have a lot of forest fires. So sometimes they'll do like a pre-burn that they have complete control of, so that an actual fire that they have no control of can't start there, right? So they'll pick these pockets and do these controlled burns. It's the same concept, so you kind of absorb that tension so that people don't get so despairing and so agitated that they actually appeal to some legitimate right-wing threat. so they can't have that. So they create these controlled burns, these controlled situations that they can cut down. I think that's a big part of it too, because you're right. Things got so desperate in the 1920s in Germany, and Carl Schmitt was saying you have to suspend, these liberal aspects of the Constitution, and declare using power what the boundaries are for this society. Otherwise, things are going to continue to degenerate, and you're going to get some monster who's going to come in, appeal to the masses, and basically turn Germany into something that we don't, into a path that we don't want to go down. I don't think anyone's been more vindicated in the 20th century than Carl Schmitt.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So
it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, because like that's literally what happened. He was trying to prevent it from happening, and everyone thinks like, oh, he's this terrible guy. And I mean, we'll talk about him more in his political thought.
We'll get Paul Gottfried on here.
Yes, yes, yeah. Lord willing, we'll have him. We'll talk about all of that. Special episode in the future. And so like that's the thing. I think like when the regime does this kind of stuff, honestly, I think it's encouraging. It encourages me as a pastor who's trying to bring faithful Christian people that actually want to believe the Bible, that actually want to live out their faith in the real world, and I really do care about all the things that are taking place in our country, and see how God's word tells them to live, like, because that doesn't exist not anywhere, but it doesn't exist largely in most of the country. Like most of the churches, the function of our churches in our country is to pacify people, like politically, right? I mean, almost in this Marxian opiate of the masses sense, right? To tell people, oh, don't worry about living here. This world is not your home. Here's the bumper sticker. And don't worry about this stuff. It's not that big a deal, which is, again, like I said earlier, you could do that when you have like a GDP that goes up by 8% every year or whatever. Like you could do that, maybe. But when things are spiraling out of control, when people are cutting off the genitals of little kids, and that's in the mainstream, that's happening at the hospital in your town, that's a little bit different. That now you have to fight. And
it's not even this leadership. And it's not even this like utilitarian argument that, you need to do it because otherwise bad things are going to happen to you. I think we actually do have an obligation to fight for our kin and our family, and by extension, our community and our our nationality. I think that we have a created obligation to care about those things, to prioritize them, even though they're not going to last forever. I think that there's this fallacy where since the world as it exists in sin is not going to be it's not eternal. It's going to end. Your family relations are not going to go along into eternity, that we therefore can stop thinking about them. I think that's a complete abuse of the gospel. I think it's a complete abuse of the nature of the kingdom of heaven, and the idea that we should not care enough for those around us and the lineage that we were born into, and our responsibility to pass that on to our posterity. I think it's completely anti-Christian to not fight for temporal things.
Absolutely. I mean, you see this in the New Testament, right? You see this where Paul, I mean, what does Paul say? That he does not provide for his own family is worse than an unbeliever, right? Yeah. Because, I mean, what's the argument he's making is that unbelievers, right, the Gentiles, they understood you have your family, you have your neighbors, you have your community, right, all around you that you need to care about, right? I mean, it radiates out from there. These things that you need to get, like immediate things, and then further away. Like you need to care about these things. You need to care about your country. You need to care about your family. You need to care about your children. You need to care about your parents, right? I mean, Jesus. I mean, one of the worst condemnations in the Gospels of someone is to the Pharisees.
You have a 25% chance.
Yeah, when they say, right, when they say, hey, I know that you're supposed to take care of your parents. Like you're the eldest son, you get a double inheritance. You're supposed to take care of your parents with that money, but it's actually good that to spite them, you donated all of it to the temple. That's a great, holy, wonderful thing that you did. Look at you. Look how great you are. Like Jesus says, like, that's abominable that you would do that. that you take the commandment and subvert it. I mean, you turn it inside out. It's evil that you would do that. But that's like most of Big Eva. That's their entire ethos is look how holy I am. Look how holy I am doing these holy things when you're letting the things that are the most important burn to the ground, right? I mean, this is a condemnation Jesus has for our culture, for our church culture, to not care about your family, not care about the world that your children are going to inherit, right? That's an evil thing to do. It's an evil that Jesus hates. And we're so blasé about it. We don't care. It's like, oh, whatever. And so I mean, I think that sums up really so much of the analysis that we're going to do here. That's contrary to what we're told.
I think that's a great way to end it. For now, because I think going forward, so much of our conversations are going to revolve around, as Christians, what are our obligations to take care of the temporal order. We do live in two kingdoms. We live in a world where we have family and we have a nation and we have people that are bound to us by blood. And I think that's important to think about those things. And we live in that kingdom, and not everyone will belong to the eternal kingdom, but we don't live in the eternal kingdom now. We live in the temporal kingdom now. And I think living in both of those worlds gives us eternal hope, but it also gives us resolve to fight for temporal things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, we can end for this week. But before we go, CJ, what stuff are you working on that people can find to get more?
I'm working on a lot. I blog at contramordor.substack.com, and I blog there at least twice a week. I also have another blog, and it's I forget. I don't even know. It's linked on the Contra Mordor, so you can find it there.
Yeah, we'll add it to the show notes.
Yeah, my Twitter is at Contra Mordor, and I'm working on a biography of Paul Gottfried. I've been working on that for about a year, and I'm about 50% done. And now I'm at the fun part, which is going through all of his personal papers and letters and correspondence, and I get to actually dig into the deep stuff. So I really want it to be a nice, solid, intellectual biography of someone that I've been heavily influenced by. So I'm working on that. And I'm also editing a festschrift for Paul Gottfried with about 20 other different writers and scholars. I get to edit that. So those will come out together as volume 1 and volume 2. And finally, I'm also working not only with you on this podcast, but I'm doing the Chronicles podcast, which the first episode should be about a week and a half before the first episode launches. So I'm really busy, but you can find me in all those places. So what about you?
Yeah, I'm producing content at Gab News, so I'm trying to have 2 or 3 articles out a week this year, and yeah, we've had plenty of content produced already, and of course my sermons from Sundays are going up as well, and of course I post probably too much on social media on Gab and on Twitter at Boniface Option. And of course, also my book, people ask me about that. When's the book coming out? Hopefully, we'll get that book out early in the second quarter of 2023. So a lot of fun content coming down very soon. And so stay tuned for both of our books and everything else that we're producing. And if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe and all the other stuff that the people at the end of these things always tell you to do. And until then, we will see you next week.